The Checkpoints is presented by pharmaceutical company GM Pharma.
But on the ground, what do these expectations and what do these statements from the Congressman Joe Wilson also change? For example, can we analyze what is going on with the Anaklia Port project right now on the ground when the government started talking about finding some new partners, bringing into the project, not rushing the events with the sanctioned Chinese company?
Yes.
I mean,
so there's a couple of things going on here. First of all, Joe Wilson, as a member of the U.S. Congress and as a politician, is making a political argument, particularly to the Trump administration and to Donald Trump. And he's saying, I support you, I'm a MAGA Republican, I'm completely on your team, and I want you guys to understand that this leader in Georgia is acting against U.S. foreign policy interests. Now that is already absolutely, literally written in black and white in the sanction that has been issued against Kvanchilashvili. And Wilson is going on to make the argument on Iran, because it's a very easy argument to make. When you have Kobakhidze sitting next to, Ismail Haniyeh at the inauguration of the Iranian president, and also some of the things that I think are signals that they've sent in their relationship with Israel, it's pretty easy to say that the government is collaborating with Iran. And of course, collaboration with Iran fits in very closely with collaboration with Russia at this time.
Can we analyze Anaklia Port project?
Anaklia, essentially the situation with Anaklia is this. The government has never put into a tender or an investor proposal on Anaklia the conditions that investors want. We, Anaklia Development Consortium, Mamuka and Badri and all these people, because they believe so strongly in the project and they believe that the government of Georgia was willing to work with them on the project, said we're going to forge ahead even though all of the ideal conditions are not in place. Kvanchilashvili genuinely worked with us and partly, it was Mamuka and Badri's confidence that they would be able to work with Kvanchilashvili to overcome these structural obstacles with the project. And in fact, they were. But it was when he fired Kvanchilashvili, when the government changed, when they brought the criminal case, it then was a signal to everybody, to the international financial institutions, to the foreign equity investors, Cerberus, which had looked at investing, was a signal to all of them, the government's not supporting this, the government's not going to work with us.
It's no longer a PPP project.
Exactly, well put. It is no longer a PPP project. The government is not going to step up and do its part to help this thing happen. And when the Georgian government says, oh, but you didn't have a major port company involved with you, or you didn't have a major shipping company, the reason is because no major port company and no major shipping company was willing to touch the project unless the Georgian government put up cash, $250 million in cash, investment in the project, or unless they put up a guarantee, because it was a greenfield project and there was uncertainty about it. And the second issue was Poti, enough of a market to have a deep water port at Poti and one at Anaklia. So
these two factors played a role for the case as well.
In everything. They played a role in all of the difficulties in obtaining equity financing when we were running the project, all the difficulties in obtaining loan financing in the project. And what's amazing about the Anaklia Development Consortium is that we basically overcame all of those obstacles. We lined up the IFI financing. We lined up the equity investment. And the government was then like, oh my God, they actually have managed to do it. So then they stepped forward and they brought the criminal case against Mamuka and they started to badmouth the project. And so, they took the further step to destroy the project because we had actually managed to overcome the market and financing obstacles that were inherent in it. Now, why is that relevant today?
But you lost the arbitration case.
We lost it in the ICC by a 2-1 decision, and the dissenting arbitrator said, how can we possibly excuse the Georgian government in this case when it brings in an investor, encourages the investor, promises that they're going to work with them for this, to work with them closely to make this project work, and then they start doing all of these things to undermine it, including encouraging AP Mahler terminals on the development of a competing port. So the third arbitrator was like, a government cannot bring in a major investor on a concession and then undermine everything they do. It was as simple as that. And the majority said, well, the contract didn't really obligate them to not undermine the project. And of course, the third judge is like, where's your common sense? You know, you can't bring somebody in and then undermine what they do. We still have our case in ICSID, the International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes, actually the shareholder, Bob Mayer, under the Dutch-Georgia Bilateral Investment Treaty. That case is under different standards. It's under standards that put a much higher obligation on the Georgian government to act in good faith and to not do the sneaky, underhanded things that they did to undermine the project. So frankly, the law in that case is more favorable to us. So even though we did not, unfortunately, win the ICC case, but I would again say it was a very, very close call. Even the majority recognized that the government's conduct towards us was not good.
So you're still discussing this case?
Yes,
there
is that case
going through with
the
that
shareholder case is still pending. I'm not allowed to give details about the schedule, but the case is still moving forward. It is for Bob Mayer's share, so it's not for the same big amount of money because it's only for his investment, not what was the total investment. But I think the case is very strong that under the kind of international law principles that apply to the Dutch-Georgia Bilateral Investment Treaty, that the government's conduct violates the terms of that treaty and that Bob Mayer should win. And I will make the point that, you know, the Georgian government has constantly said, oh, now that, you know, that we won the ICC case, this other case is obviously not going to succeed, and they should drop the case, and they tried to get the case to be dropped, and the arbitral tribunal has disagreed with that and has in fact maintained the case because they understand that the case is under a different body of law, it's a different plaintiff, it involves even different assets. For example, the ICC case was only about Anaklia Port. The ICSID case is about both the port and the free the free trade zone. So it has an entirely additional component to it because Mayer was an investor in both. So back to the
picture that we're getting right now around Anaklia is the government is in dispute with the American investor and it's trying to bring in Chinese investors.
So what happened? So let's talk about the new tender. So the new tender did not address any of these problems that existed before with us. The new tender the government is not, it says the government will have a share, 51% share. The government will have a 51% share in the new project, but what's that going to be? Is that going to be like land rights or you know, the railroad or whatever stuff that the investor expects? These investors want to see actually cash or a guarantee about traffic. The new tender does not have that kind of government skin in the game, that sort of government investor. And the second thing is the new tender doesn't do anything to ring fence Poti Port. There's still this remaining uncertainty. Will AP Mahler terminals do a deep sea port at Poti or not? And as long as there's that uncertainty, the project doesn't look good. So what happened is, in order to show the Georgian public something good after these, after the introduction of the new Russian law and they passed the new Russian law, after they passed the new Russian law, that's when they made the announcement, we've awarded the tender to a Chinese company in May, right? In fact, they have never issued the order. They have never issued the order giving the concession to that company. And we in the arbitration, as well as a lot of Georgian civic organizations, Tina Khidashvili, for example, and her organization, have pushed and said, well, what's going on? What's going on? You know, it's just a matter of public interest. Are you in negotiations with them? Are you going to issue an order? Do you have a draft order? Where is this going? You told us in May that you've given this project to the Chinese. Here it is September, here it is October, here it is November. Where's the project? Okay. And
what type of answer did you get?
And so, for a long time, they just kept getting put off. They weren't getting an answer. And then I guess it was probably in the last couple of months, in November or December, the Ministry of Economy, Davitashvili, finally answered and said, quite explicitly in black and white, we're nowhere with the Chinese. They just said that we are still at the point of determining whether the Chinese satisfied the requirements of the tender. Mm-hmm. And we haven't even started negotiations with them.
Yeah, but we know that there was also an issue with the tender itself, right? The tender condition itself, because no state company could be involved in the tender.
So what we understand is that I think there were probably three things going on here that destroyed the deal with the Chinese. I think that deal is dead, okay, or at least it's dead for now. And there were at least three things that were going on with it. One was it violated the tender conditions because it's a state company. And the tender said that the award shall not be given to any company that has more than 20 or 30% state ownership. So they violated their own tender conditions, and that was a problem for them. But whatever, the way they are, they would have probably gotten around that. But secondly, what we heard was the Chinese were demanding, understandably so, the Chinese were demanding a bigger investment from the government and knowing what the investment would be from the government, and they were demanding some kind of certainty about what was going to happen with Poti Port, and the government won't give it. Okay. The third factor might be the fact that the Chinese company is sanctioned. I don't know whether there's still anybody in the Georgian government who's reasonable enough and thoughtful enough to think that way, but in a normal government, they would have said, oh my, this company is sanctioned, and if you had the port, the 49% shareholder of Anaklia being a U.S. and internationally sanctioned company, it was going to destroy the business model of the port. There would have no Western shipping could have gone through there. It would have greatly reduced the amount of the countries and the flagships that they could do business with. So it was a disaster, and I guess now they're talking about. So that's why they're talking about now they have to bring in another investor.
What type of other investors might be interested in Anaklia? Because of course, no Western investments. I don't know who might be expecting Western investments in this project or in any big project at this point.
The only, I don't think they could even get, let's say, a sanctioned Russian oligarch or somebody who doesn't care about the U.S. reaction or losing, because they're essentially, they're already under sanctions and things like that. They have to be willing to literally throw away their money. Because unless and until the Georgian government gives certainty on these two major issues, which is the amount and nature of the Georgian government's investment in the project and the question about Poti Port, until they give certainty on that nobody is going to invest in this project, even somebody who, there's no question about Western investors right now because of the whole political context, the sanctions and everything else. So everybody is running away from Georgia right now. They're all hands off. So I don't see any prospect of them being able to do this project anytime soon.
The Checkpoints is presented by pharmaceutical company GM Pharma.